That's kind of funny. All right, there we go. So, I found a children's book that I will be reading for my first book of the ensuing rest of the year, I guess. It's the for Monday. So I got to read the book, review it, and then ideas that inspired. Views Day movie on Tuesday. Like prompts, the ideas that the book inspired on Wednesday. Thursday would be the review of a movie, which I feel should be different than Views Day night. And then prompts based off the new movie on Saturday. Friday is... I forget what Friday was supposed to be. Because Views Day, Friends Day. I don't remember what my system was for it. But the prompts based off of the movie would be on Saturday, I believe. Sunday is supposed to be the plans and update day on projects and where we're going. And then next week is going to be tabletop game and product and service. I think I've already got something for product and service, which would be the stuff I shot but haven't uploaded yet for like the tripod and stuff like that. And then after that would be taste tests, which I just sort of recorded some of that today. And then music? Are we at music? No, we just reviewed music. So we'd be going back to art that I saw out while I was traveling. And then another video game, which I've got some of that video on here. And then the health and well-being, I believe that one's set to be the review of the cardio and endurance training that I've been doing. And that should get me all the way to the end of the 4 weeks of the month that are daytime videos. And then nighttime videos are going to be writing, video making, which is the category I do worst at. Board games, and product design for the end of the month. And then next month will be, again, a start over with a reading, movie, etc. And meanwhile, I'll be doing a food-based music, game design, video game design, and fitness routine. So, and at that point, I'll have started keto as a diet. And I will probably have already started a new part-time job to fill in some of the finances. And I may see if I can get to a range where I can start doing the Roving Jack videos again. Because I want to get back into doing that. But today, as a sort of a day off, I've been playing around. I finally pulled up the list of some of my science fiction stuff, and it's interesting because there are two of those lists. One of them is literally stringing together a science fiction series that covers a time span in human history, upcoming history. I don't know how you'd call that. So it's basically the near future all the way to the far distant future. And it's the events, effect, and story of the next stories. And there are minor settings that can kind of branch off from each other and eventually recoalesce. But there's also one that's a little more of a look through some of my favorite things about science fiction, like my favorite series or stories, and finding a way to combine them into one greater universe. And so I'm kind of playing around with both of them. The one that's sort of already partially fleshed out is a much shorter batch of science fiction stories that talk about somebody in the near future, a story about them, and what feels like 2 or 3, maybe 5 different series. But if you look into it, some of the details are similar enough that we combine them together into a greater universe that you don't have to read one to recognize the other. So, I mean, I don't know which of those is the analog to my my multiverse, my fantasy megaverse. So I don't know that it's as cleanly possible to delineate the difference or the similarities between them. I think my fantasy universe is a unique conglomeration of ideas that have come to me over the years. And the closest I have to that is, like, with fantasy, you can do the magical parallel realm. It's not as easy to do with science fiction, and when you do it, it comes off as sort of like a cheesy, cheap trick. It's parallel universes. Yeah, that's not how that works. I mean, the TV show Sliders was a TV show I enjoyed greatly, and Doctor Who is kind of fun, but I'm not going to be, swapping those. Doctor Who moves over into this universe where the rules are slightly different. It's like, no, science fiction is a little bit like, if you try to aim for decent science fiction, not science fantasy. And no disrespect to science fantasy. I've got some of those types of stories too. I love a good, Barsoom or John Carter of Mars, for those of you who are not familiar with, or like a Flash Gordon kind of, like, some of those are just fun stories. I don't want to say nostalgic because they were before my time, but I still enjoyed them. So I like those kinds of things. And I could build a universe around some of those types of stories and make it an interesting universe. But I want to be a little more Star Trek-y, like Star Trek The Next Generation. There isn't much in Star Trek that we can't say, oh yeah, that could happen in the real world. And in areas of Star Trek that do have things that are a little like, oh, that's not very realistic, I would be interested in changing those aspects of the story in a way that they're more hard science, realistic stuff. There wouldn't be a Q. There wouldn't be. I debate whether or not I would do something with telepathy or empathy or those types of powers that people have. I feel like I get that, and they're sort of a trope in science fiction, but I also don't want that sort of magic-iness to it. So I'm inclined to say probably not. Although Dune looks at some of that and comes up with good alternatives. Although Dune also has a lot of they can foresee the future. I don't want prophecies. I don't want mind reading. Well, unless you're using a tech to do it. It's just trying to figure out what the right stories are to choose from, and I'll probably have to rework a lot of them. Just sort of building a timeline of my favorite fiction in a setting, into one setting. So a timeline of my favorite science fiction into a shared setting. And then the other one is a little bit more of a list of story ideas that I had that I can combine into a greater universe. So, like early on, you have a character who is mining in the asteroid belt, because that's the new gold rush. It's not gold so much as other more important minerals, but he's mining in that, and it's the experience of somebody like that. And he ends up in a situation that moves him to a far distant point in time. It's complicated. It's not time travel. Don't really want to discuss it right now because it spoils the story. But you have that first character, and then you have sort of like more exploration of the consequences of people mining in the asteroid belts and potentially pirates, and a conflict between off-Earth colonies and Earth colony. And then you have gradually a point where struggles on Earth become an issue. Then contact is made with a coming ship, and they come to Earth. And so it's the first contact with another humanoid. They're humanoid because they chose to be. It's complicated. Again, don't want to spoil much. So first contact story. The threat of a hostile alien life form coming, fleeing Earth. And from that point on, it branches off to people trying to escape and the different consequences they face when things don't go as planned. And each of those then sort of tells a series of stories along their own timeline. And at a distant point in the future, those timelines start to converge. And then in the far distant future, the person from the first story in the sequence is revived from the past and finds themselves in the midst of a world full of people who are the consequences of the journeys of each of those separate and disparate groups. So it's an interesting sort of approach, but it's far more about a timeline than a multiverse approach. And I do think I need to update that timeline a little bit. Now, looking at the old version of it, it's not my preferred or my best work. But looking at that one, that was the original one that was on my mind. I was like, this is my science fiction series where I built a timeline about things that happen and what it means for the future of humanity. And that's sort of what I wrote in that timeline. And then looking at it, I'm like, I remember this being more complicated. And I went, oh, right. That was a different one that I was playing around with, where I actually built a master list of all the science fiction that I loved and then imagined how I would build a universe where they could all be part of the same universe. And that one got complicated and interesting. And part of what you're doing in that kind of story setting is changing so much of everything that in order to make them fit together, that it's not really the same as all those universes that you started with. So that one's interesting to examine. It's the reimagining of entire settings that are no longer the stories they started out as. What was the name? It's right on the tip of my brain. They remade it recently. It's a science fiction movie where the main character goes in and gets memory implants. And the first version of it was with Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's based off of the Philip K. Dick "We Will Remember It For You Wholesale." Dang it! I can't even remember what it is. Ugh. All right. Well, I'm thinking I got a couple more minutes here, so I think I'll call it at 11:15 here tonight. So that's 4 more minutes from now, so about 20 minutes total video time tonight. It's my day off. I don't have a lot to report. I ate some things that made me sick. I've been playing around with my science fiction settings. I got some books and some stuff planned for the episodes of daytime videos this week coming up. I think that's kind of it. That's everything. That's sort of what's going on in my life right now. I should also probably build a master list of all the projects that I worked on so far this year. I think I'll probably try to recap some of that on Fridays. I think that was one of the ideas of what I was going to do. I like having that symmetry of the review and rate, something else, and then the creative prompts inspired by, and then a review and rate, something else, creative prompts inspired by, and then plans for the week. That seems like the right format for what I'm aiming for these days. So I think that's what we're going to do. If you have any recommendations for stuff to check out, you can certainly comment below, and I'll check into them. I can't make any guarantees because I live on a budget. So if it's not something I have access to that I could do, like if it's a book or a movie, I might be able to find it at the library. Board games might be a little bit harder, but I might be able to find a copy. And products, that's a little bit harder. And then art or music or taste tests, maybe. Video games, again, a little bit hard. I've got a couple of options of how I might be able to do some of that stuff. And then health and fitness is primarily worked out for the rest of the year. So, yeah. I'm always open to hearing your ideas. I'll put them on a list and start figuring out how to make some of them happen. So if you want to see me do something, let me know. Even if it's not on my current list of things that I do, I'll see if I can find a way to make it happen. Because I want this to be, participatory. All right, so I think it's just about time to call it. Wow, clock on here is weird. Just gave me 2:47 seconds. Yeah, you're being a dork. You are being a dork. So we're 20 minutes in. I'm going to call it. Thank you for joining me, and have yourself a wonderful night. Take care.